Okay, so in this tutorial we're going to learn how to make a stencil portal, which not only lets you cut a hole in space and hide your avatar unless you're visible through the hole, but we're also going to add the ability for your avatar to come outside of the portal in a space around it. And to get started, I'm first going to go into how I figured out how to do this, just because it gives you a really good intuition on how stencils actually work. So first I wanted to explain how stencils work in shaders. So you can basically treat them like a stencil in real life, where you have a big piece of like a square here, and you can cut out a shape in the middle, like maybe a person or something, and you can already see I have something hidden behind there. And then, you take your crayon or something, and then you just use your marker on here. It's basically like a stencil in real life. But in shaders, you can actually use a stencil to only show this layer we have back here if it's within this shape. And this shape can be any piece of geometry. So you could have just a sphere that only lets this thing to be revealed, otherwise it won't be there. You can also do the inverse, where you instead block out right here, and everywhere where the stencil value is not there, you can see the hidden shader. So with that basic explanation, we can basically define a shader which cuts out an area, this white box, and only within that area our avatar will appear. That's fairly simple. Now the only problem is, if I try to put this underneath my avatar, you can see the top of my avatar isn't showing. So the real question is, how do you do this and have your avatar come out the top? To explain this, I'm going to show the original clip that I saw when I first saw this portal effect, and I'll show you the little hints I got from that clip, figuring it out. Okay, so this is Cube showing off his portal effect on Strip and Stream. This is where I initially saw it.
That's him right there. That's cute.
Oh, what the fuck?
Wait, they just happen to be here.
That's cool as fuck!
Hey,
What the fuck?
streaming right now.
This is
So far, he hasn't escaped the circle, which is pretty simple. We already have that right here, right? And then he sticks his head through.
tripping me. This is tripping me out. What the?
Dude, that's fucking
Yo, there's
nuts.
nothing behind that. Look behind it.
Yo, I need you guys for tomorrow.
And you can see his head actually sticks out past the circle. So there's something else going on there. Okay, so that stumped me for quite a while, but I played this back at 0.25 speed and paused it right about here, and I found this weird artifact where his head is kind of cut off by an invisible object here. And that got me thinking. Basically my theory was that he had some sort of invisible cube or cylinder or some sort of geometry that extended out past his head that was revealing him, and it was transparent so you could see the people behind. So if we had some sort of cube here, and then on the top another cube or something, we could hide, or we could show our avatar after we've come outside the small lower bit. Alright, so if I take the original portal and I apply some materials here to the invisible pieces, you can kind of start to see what's actually going on here. So we've got an invisible cylinder here where the walls are one material, the floor of it is another material, and the back of it is a third material, and the inside is another material. Of course there's two on there just to get the distortion effect. That's pretty much the basics. So if we use our simple idea here, what we want is this circle in the middle to reveal us, and these walls on the outside to reveal us. Okay, so I've switched to an older version just to show one small thing. This ring around the center circle that reveals the inside, you need to make sure that that does not show your legs down beneath. So if we use the same shader for the center, you can see your legs would show through, which doesn't make any sense, right? And the way around that is pretty simple actually. You don't even need a stencil for this. All you need to do is use a shader in which this ring would write to depth. So if I switch to this, you can see this is a ring shape here. The center is just not there. It's just a piece of geometry. And all it does is hide things that are beneath it, just like a normal object. So normal opaque geometry, if you put it in front of something, it just hides what's behind it. That's all we really need. So this is just a normal shader on the bottom, this white bit, but it's at a specific hue. Okay, so now for the bottom. The bottom is basically the same as this ring. All it needs to do is write to depth. So it will occlude just like this cube does. So anything behind it is hidden. The only thing is, we need to do that and also be invisible. So usually transparent objects do not write to depth because you want to show what's behind them, like the sun here. But in our case, we want to have it transparent and occlude what's behind it. Okay, so I briefly mentioned that this outer yellow ring is at a specific hue, and by that I mean render hue. So all these different shaders or materials are at specific hues so that we can control the order that they're rendered in. Because from the bottom, we want to make sure we're invisible, and from the top, we want to show the avatar correctly. So the order in which this goes in is the bottom is rendered first, which hides the avatar in general. Then next is the yellow ring, which will hide your legs behind the outside the portal. And then next is the actual portal part, which shows your legs beneath the portal. And then after that, we render these walls. And then at last, we render the avatar. The reason we render the avatar last is because we want to check the stencil buffer for those stencils we set up from these materials here. And I'll explain that in a minute. Okay, before we start writing the shaders to do this, we need a mesh to actually put the shaders on. So we're going to open up Blender and make a mesh with blue walls, a circle, outer circle that's red, an inner circle that's probably going to be like yellow, and then purple bottom. Okay, so we're going to load up Blender to make this mesh. First off, you probably want to open up this little plus symbol here in the top right and turn on backface culling. The reason we want that is so if we're inside the mesh, you can't see anything in here. If we have backface culling off, then we'd be able to see. And what we want to know is which way these faces are actually facing. So we actually want to see nothing if they're facing away from us. That's important because, as you saw in the portal here, the top face here is different from the bottom. We want two different materials there. So yeah, make sure that's on. I'm also going to turn on screen keys so you can see what I'm pressing down here. So if you ever miss anything, just look down there for what I pressed. I'll try to explain as much as I can. Alright, so we're in this default scene with a light and a camera and a cube. We're going to press A twice. That'll select everything. Now if you press delete and then enter, that'll get rid of it. Next we want to press Shift A, which will open the add menu. Go to mesh, and we're going to add a circle. Now this circle is actually just a line. You can see there's no actual faces here. We want to hit tab to go into edit mode, press F to fill that face, and now you'll see from the top we see a face, from the bottom we don't. The reason we don't see one from the bottom is because we have backface culling on, which is important. Next, since we're in edit mode, we can just press E and drag upwards a little bit. That'll extrude those vertices upwards. Could probably go a little bit higher. So now we have a cylinder, but the problem is now we can see a face in the bottom, right? And then the inside we can see nothing. So actually, these are backwards. We want to press A twice to select all the vertices, and press space. Go to flip normals. Space is just search, and press enter. And now you can see from the bottom, we don't see that face anymore. We only see it from the inside. So this is exactly like this right here, right? So we have the bottom face here, we have the blue, and we have the top here. We need to cut out this circle here. Okay, so to cut out that circle in the middle, what we need to do is first make sure we're in object mode. Down here you can see that. Press Shift A, go to Mesh, add a circle. You'll see that the circle is now overlapping the original circle, so we want to scale that down. Press S to scale, move your mouse, left click, there we go. Now we need to move this down just a little bit, and we want to cut this into the mesh. So to do that, what you can do is enter edit mode by pressing tab. Actually, sorry, go to object mode first. Select the circle you just made, the small one. Shift click on the first circle, and then hit edit mode. And now we can go to tools, and we have a tool called knife project here. If we do that, you'll see it'll cut into the mesh based on where we are viewing. We don't quite want that cut there. We want it to be straight up and down, right? So if we Control Z, we can go back. To get straight up and down, we could just sit here and like try to position our angle, but that's not quite good enough. What we want to do is press numpad 7, which will move us up and down. We want to press numpad period, which will focus on what we're selected, and then press numpad 5, which will put in an orthographic view. So you can see there's no walls there. It's because we're looking straight down in an orthographic view. There's no perspective, no 3D perspective. So now if we did a knife project, you can see it cut the top and the bottom. That's fine. We can now delete the second circle here. Just go in the hierarchy and delete it. And if we select this and go to edit mode, we can see what we've done. Now you might see the shape looks kind of weird now. That's because we're still in perspective mode. If we press numpad 5, we can go back to, sorry, we were in orthographic mode. If we press numpad 5, we can go to perspective mode. So now we need to get rid of this circle on the top. The easiest way to do that is to select face select down here. I already have it selected. Press this one with right click, shift right click, shift right click. That gets you the whole face there. Press space, type in dissolve, and then select dissolve faces. So now we have a hole in the bottom, and the top is a solid circle. Okay, now that we have the circle in the center and we have no circle on the top, we need to add this bottom face here, the purple one. So we have the blue, we have the red, we have the center, this bottom one here that hides everything from the bottom. To do that, well, we already have this face here, it's just not double-sided, right? So to make it double-sided, what we can do is go to face select mode, select these with shift right click, and then we can shift D to duplicate. And you'll see it'll move my mouse. If I just right click, it'll stop that movement. Now they're on top of each other, you can see that there. Now if I press space and type flip normals, we can flip them. And if I move it around, you can kind of see it's still a circle in the center. We don't really want that, we want a solid face. So Control Z. We want to also dissolve the faces. So if I move that out again, you can see that's one solid circle. So now it's double-sided. There's a circle on the bottom, there's a circle with an inner circle on the top, and the top face is solid. So that's pretty much the mesh. Okay, so now the mesh is pretty much done. We just need to add the colors that you see here. Right? So we want 1, 2, 3, 4 colors. I'll make the center circle here green. And let's do that in Blender. So add 4 materials in this little tab right here. Make sure you're in, I guess we should be in object mode. So once you've added these 4 materials by hitting plus 4 times, you'll have these little empty materials. If you hit new, this one will fill in. We want to select the diffuse color, make that green, and we can rename this material green. Let's do the same from here. So diffuse color blue, make this blue. So new diffuse color, make this red, call this red. For some reason it's red 001, I'm not sure. And then the last one, make this purple and then call it purple. Now you'll see that our shape is entirely green. That's because it's using the first one because it didn't have a material set before. So to set the materials properly, we need to go back to edit mode. Let's do the outer ring first. So let's make sure we have the right piece. No. So there might be a little bit of weirdness when you're selecting because this is double-sided. You can see I'm selecting the bottom if I press G to move it around. So what we actually want is not the bottom. We want this face here. So to get around this weirdness, try to select the bottom, right? And then press H to hide it. Now we can select the top easily, right? And we can hit red and then hit assign. So now those are red. And if we press Alt H, the bottom will come back. So you can see bottom is green, top is red. Now that the bottom is back, we can select it. Should be fairly easy selectable. Make sure that you check by pressing G and moving it around. We can make the bottom purple. I don't know why that's purple 001. Whatever. So now that's purple, red, there's green in the center. Now we just need the blue walls. So to do the walls, easiest way is to select one of them and then press C, which will give you a brush select. And you can just wipe across the screen and then rotate 90 degrees. Do that again, rotate 90 degrees, swipe with left click. And now you'll have all the walls there. If we go to blue and hit assign, there you go. It's quite purplish blue. Oh, there we go. It's just because we're in edit mode. So yeah, the walls are blue. We also want the top to be blue. So to do that, get inside the model, go to edit mode, select the top, face, go to blue, hit assign, done. So now if we look around, we should have what we have in Unity. With my already finished version, this should be green, red, blue, and then on the bottom purple. And green, red, blue, blue on the top, and purple on the bottom. So that's pretty much done. Alright, so next we just need to export this model. So just go to File, Export, FBX, and then navigate to your project folder that you set up, and then export it as a portal mesh, right? And that should be good to go. Now we just need to load up Unity. Okay, so now we have that mesh imported into Unity. You should see the mesh. It might be sideways. That's just how it looks. If you drag it in the scene, it's right side up. I'm just going to zero these transform out just to get it in the center of the world. There's going to be a materials folder with those materials we made. Just leave those there for now. So we're going to create a folder called portal shaders. I'm going to open that up. Now we're going to right click, create, and shader, and then unlit. We're going to create 4 unlit shaders, one for each color. I'm going to call this walls. Right click, create shader. This will be called outer ring. So the walls is the blue, the outer ring is the red. This will be called inner circle. That's the green right there, and then call this back. Right, so 4 shaders, 4 materials. So now we can apply those actually. If we right click each of these shaders one at a time, right click create material, it'll make a material that uses that shader. So we can do that for all of them. And we'll have 4 materials now. They're all going to be white for now. We'll mess with that in a minute. For now, just make sure you get the wall shader, wall material, sorry, onto the wall. Then next, the outer ring onto the red, and the inner ring onto the green, and then the back onto the back. Okay, so now everything's white. We should quickly go into these shaders and color them again. Right now our shader doesn't have anything. We're just gonna go inside, and you'll see the default shader here with all the default stuff. Really all we need to do is comment out this texture sample line here. Just put 2 slashes in front of it. We really don't need the fog. And then in here we can return float for, this will be the wall shader, right? So we want blue. So this is RGB, so 0R 0G, and then 1B, and then 1 alpha. Now if we go back, that'll turn this blue. It's not shaded though, don't worry about that. If you wanted to add shading, that'd be a little bit more complex. It doesn't really matter. So we're going to do the same thing for the other ones. So the walls is blue, we want to go to the outer ring, which is the red one. Find its shader, open it up, comment out the fog, comment out the texture sample, float 4, this is red, so 1, 0, 0, 1. So that's 1 red, 0 green, 0 blue, 1 alpha. Save that, that turns red. Do the same for the inner circle. Comment out these, comment out that. Make this return a float 4. This will be green, so just make the green channel 1. That's green now, now we just need the purple. So open up back, comment this out, comment that out, return float 4. Purple is red and blue, I believe. So 1, 0, 1, 1. So that's 1 in the red channel, 1 in the blue, 1 in the alpha. So it's pink. It's close enough. It's good enough for what we have now. We should probably make it a little bit darker, so we can make that 0.5 on each of those, because the error shader uses pink. We want to know if ours is actually pink. Let's make it 0.1. That's better. So yeah, 0.1 on the red, 0 on the green, 0.1 on the blue, 1 on the alpha. Okay, so I've imported a little Blender monkey head just as my model. So you're going to use whatever model you have. I've also made this is a surface shader here. You don't need to create this, just edit the shader you're using. So say you're using cube shader, just make the edits I'm making to his shader, or whatever shader you're using. You don't want to make your own, because then it will be lit like this. So just make sure your whatever shader you're using is on this model, and open up that shader. So in the shader, you're going to find somewhere in it, you'll see the sub shader thing, and then you'll also see tags nearby it. So you want to find that. We want to make an edit to this tags thing. We want the render type to be opaque, and then we want the Q to be transparent +6. So that'll just make sure we're rendering this last. So the rest of our stuff will be transparent +5, transparent +4, whatever. We're just going to make sure this is the last thing rendered in our group of things. And then underneath the tags, just somewhere before the CG program, we want to write Stencil, and then parentheses or brackets. We want to do a reference value of some number. This is up to you. 5 is good. You just want to know that if somebody else is using 5 on their stencil, it might reveal you. So just choose a number that's up to 255 as the max. I just choose 5. And then we want to compare that. The comparison should be equal. So what we're saying here is only show this shader if there is a 5 in the stencil buffer. That's what the comparison is. So if the stencil buffer equals 5 at that pixel, show this shader. So if we save that and go back, you'll see my avatar has disappeared now, right? That makes sense because the stencil buffer is 0 by default. There's no 5s here. So if I change this to 0, you'll see it shows up again. So leave it at 5, or whatever number you chose. Okay, so our mesh is invisible. We'll fix that in a minute. Let's just get the Q correct. So I mentioned the Q earlier. That's the order that these things are going to render in. We want the purple first, then red, then green, then blue. So let's do that real quick. So let's go to the back shader, which is the purple. Inside the tags, just add Q equals transparent +1. So this will be the first thing. We're doing above transparency because some of our stuff is invisible. We just want to make sure that we don't hide nameplates and stuff. So yeah, that's good for the back shader. That's really all you need to do for the back shader. We just need to make it invisible later, which we'll do at the end. Next up is the red. That is the outer ring. So in the outer ring, we can just do Q equals transparent plus 2. So that's good, right? Next up is the inner circle. That will be Q equals transparent plus 3, right? We did 2 and then 3. And now the big blue walls, which is called walls. This Q can be set to transparent plus 4. So now we have the Q's in the proper order, and the avatar shader is plus 6. You can make it plus 5 if you want. I just made it plus 6 just to fit enough room in. It's fine. It doesn't really matter as long as it's the last thing rendered in this set of objects. It should be fine. Okay, so now that the Q's are set up properly, let's start rendering stuff. So first off, the easiest one to do is the green. That is the inner circle. Open that up. We're going to find the subshader, the tags, right after the tags, or somewhere in between tags and pass, or subshader and pass. What to write? Stencil, then brackets. We want to write a value of 5, right? Because our avatar shader is checking for 5. So we want to reference the value 5. We want to comp always. So instead of if it equals 5, we want to always do what we want to always fill it with 5. And then to fill it, we need to do pass replace. So what this is saying is reference value 5, always pass the check. If we pass the check, replace the value in the buffer with our reference, which is 5. In other words, always put 5 in the buffer. So that's good. If we save and go here, you'll see our avatar shows up now inside the green area. The only issue is we're cutting off our half here, right? There's a half in the bottom that we can't see through the green. So that's because this green is writing to depth by default. So if we go after the stencil and do ZWrite off, that'll turn off the depth writing, which is that like I was talking about with the cube, where it occludes things. So since this is physically in front of things, it will hide other things behind it. We just turn that off. So things that are hidden beneath it, like the rest of the monkey, are now shown. Okay, so if we select the model, from this angle we can see we also need the red and the blue to reveal our model. So let's go into those shaders. So the red is the outer ring. And here we just want to, write stencil first. Stencil ref 5. Oh, that was a big number. Comp always and pass replace. This is just like the green, except the green has ZWrite off. We want the red to have ZWrite on because we want it to cut off showing the bottom of the model there. So if you select the model, you can see there's a little bit cut off, which gives that effect that you are actually outside the portal. If we just add this to the blue, it'll do that. So let's quickly go into blue, walls, stencil. This should be ref 5. Why does it keep doing that? Comp always and pass replace. Now the shader's pretty much good. The only thing is we need to turn off ZWrite on this wall shader. The reason we need to do that is because this is eventually going to be, is going to be invisible. So with ZWrite off, that means things behind it will be visible through it. So you can see that the Unity grid is now showing through it because ZWrite is off. So really all that's left is to make the blue invisible, make the red invisible, make the purple invisible, and then maybe add some sort of effect in the middle. I'll probably leave the effect up to you. I'll just leave it green for now, but I'll make the rest of them invisible. So to make them invisible, we need to actually add alpha blending. So if we go into the wall shader, right, To add alpha blending, there's a specific thing you need to add here. It's the blend mode. You need source alpha and 1 minus source alpha, written like that. So SRC. When I'm saying source, I mean SRC. That just basically lerps between the color and the background color by the alpha. It's kind of weird to explain. You can search blend modes, shader unity on Google, and you'll get a better explanation. But what that does is it allows us to go down here, and you see where we're returning 1 in the alpha channel. If we return 0, it should go away. But you can see our avatar still shows above here, right? That's what we want. And we can see the cube behind there too. So now if we go to the let me first show what happens if you don't have a blending mode, right? If we comment this out and we return 0, you'll see it doesn't do anything. Without a blending mode, it doesn't know how to use the alpha channel, basically. So just make sure that's enabled. We need to do the same thing for the red, so we can just copy this blending mode here, go into the outer ring, add that right there, and return 0. So this looks pretty good. It's pretty much the entire effect already, except for the bottom. We just need to add the transparency to the bottom too. So we can do that by doing this. But we want to leave Z-Write on. You saw the other ones had Z-Write off. Z-Write should be on for this one. That's so from the bottom you don't see the blue faces. So if Z-Write's on, it will cover those up. And we also need to return 0 on the alpha channel, right there at the end. Now it's invisible, so from the bottom you see nothing. From the top you see your avatar. And that's basically it. So now if I move this portal mesh up or down, you'll see my avatar is completely visible, and there it's visible again. Now the only limitation with this shader is you can only be visible within this volume. So if you make it big enough, it doesn't really matter, right? You can rotate this around, you can have this on your hand or something. You can move pretty far. I probably made it a little bit too big, to be honest, but it doesn't really matter. One thing you can add on your own is editing this inner circle shader, and you could add some sort of color to it. Since I didn't set up UVs on this sphere here, it's not really going to be too easy, but if you know anything about Blender, you can set up UVs and then edit the shader and scroll some sort of texture like I did in the example when I showed. So if you've gotten lost anywhere, I'll include a Unity package of this exact scene here in the description. You can click that and import it in your project and find out where you went wrong.